creatures are all around us. We might not see them, but they can see us. They lurk in the depths of the shadows, the wilderness, or even outside of our windows. The stories I'm about to share with you tonight are encounters with strange and bizarre creatures not of this world. Enjoy. A couple of years ago, I was in the woods in Kentucky, hiking and looking for ginseng. I stopped to search the ground, and I saw a small stone roll past me. I look up and saw another land about 6 feet away from me. At first, I'm thinking nothing of it, but was just curious to figure out what was going on. I move up on the hill about 100 feet, and again, a small stone lands beside me. I start looking around again, and then all of a sudden, it was just raining down small stones all around me. By small, I mean really small, like pebbles almost. The hair on my neck stands up, and I get a terrible, I am in danger kind of feeling. I immediately start heading down off the mountain, while loads of little rocks are falling all around me. I kept thinking I saw shadows, or something moving quickly between the trees, but never actually saw whatever it was. I have to add that I was on my very own private property, and no one was around for miles and miles. It's a very, very secluded area, and none of the rocks actually hit me. This is my first time posting, and I've never told anyone about this experience before. Hey guys, I live in northern Michigan, and I've had a lot of weird experiences, so here's a pretty tame experience to start off. My parents own a 10-acre property, and a good half of it is made up of woods that backs up to a national forest. It was pretty early in the evening, so there was still light out when we were coming up the driveway. Once we were a good 15 feet away from their garage, we saw this black thing or animal run in front of our car and into the grassy field to the left of our driveway. It was a quadruped and about the size of a medium dog. It was really fast, so I didn't get a good look at its face, but I know it had a long, skinny tail and had no fur. From what I could tell, it had back legs much like a dog, but ran more like a cat. It sort of bounced more than it ran, if you can picture that in your head at all. We brushed it off at first, thinking maybe it was just my mother's dog. That is, until her dog came out of the garage. The dog didn't react to this thing at all. This event happened a few months ago, and we recently had my parents over for dinner, and while we were talking about weird experiences, my mom mentioned how her and my father have been seeing this black thing walking out in the neighbor's tree line, and they haven't been able to get a great look at it, but they have no clue what it could be. We assume what we saw was the same things my parents have been seeing. My father had also mentioned there being a time when he was out on a trail in the woods all by himself, and he heard something growl at him, and it scared him enough to go back to the house. I can't say if this was related though. If anyone has any theories or knows of any animals that this thing could possibly be, please let me know. Thank you in advance. My dad is a massive nerd and alien enthusiast and would always talk to me about the probability of existence of other intelligent life. As a child, I was equally fascinated, but never really scared, and always wondered about my own chances of maybe meeting an alien. At the time of my encounter, I was 7 or maybe 8 years old, and had never really known about abductions or aliens being scary. To me, they were just something neat. Because of how my house is situated, I always figured that it would be difficult for any visitors, so to speak, to find good parking, because the terrain was very steep with dense pine forest. I live in a small town in Colorado, and my house is in a valley on top of a hill, closely wedged into the side of a mountain. My street is extremely quiet, and there are only 3 homes that were very close to my own, and they were all vacation homes, so they were usually vacant. There are no lights on my street, and it gets basically 0 traffic, so there is never anyone around other than my own family. When this all happened, I still shared a room with my sister, who was notoriously a heavy sleeper, known to sleep through fire alarms, thunderstorms, and everything. Meanwhile, I was a very light sleeper, and I still am. At some point, I began suddenly feeling extremely scared. This feeling of fear and dread became a regular occurrence, happening once, sometimes twice a week. I was never a kid who worried about monsters under the bed or in the closet, so it was weird that I suddenly started feeling like there was something else in the room with me. At night, I would hear the door handle turn, followed by strange chirping sounds that would stop as soon as I moved. The sound scared me, and I began sleeping completely under the covers, making sure none of me was exposed to the outside world. Soon after I began sleeping like this, I would feel something tapping the covers. Oftentimes, the tapping and chirping happened together, and like always, stopped if I moved around. Now anyone could chalk this up to the imagination of a 7-year-old, and that's what my parents thought, and honestly, sometimes I wonder if that's really all it was. But then I think about one particular night that makes me nearly certain that there was something other than my sister in the room. One night, my parents went out for dinner and hired a babysitter. It was a very normal night, and the sitter was super nice. She read us a bedtime story and actually ended up falling asleep herself. She was on my sister's bed, which was in the middle of the room, and my bed was up against the wall that had the door to go out of the room. Because the babysitter was there, I felt safer, safe enough to sleep with my head above the covers. I was still a little scared, so I struggled to fall asleep and ended up staring at the wall for quite a while. It was at this time that I felt the sudden fear and impending doom. The door handle turned, making its little sounds as the door was slowly pushed open. I was paralyzed with fear, too afraid to move and hide under the covers, because I thought the sudden movement might put me in danger. A tall, white thing slinked into the room. It was around 7 feet tall, super thin. Its skin was sort of translucent and had a greenish-gray hue, an extremely muted version of the glow of those glow-in-the-dark stars that you put on the bedroom ceilings. Its head was in a super dramatic, angular teardrop shape. It was more of a really long, slight pear shape, still rounded, super sunken in with defined bone structure and heavy shadows. Its eyes were like empty voids, no reflection or obvious dimension. They really just seemed like large holes in its face, empty sockets. There were no visible eyelids, a small narrow bump of the nose, and small, undefined slit where the mouth was. Its arms and torso were very thin and long, but I couldn't see its fingers from where I was. It moved very quickly and fluidly, going right to my sister's bed. It started for a bit. Maybe it was confused by the presence of the babysitter. It simply watched, moving around the bed, ever so slowly. I was horrified. I wanted to scream and run and hide, but I was too scared. All I could do was stare as it circled my sister's bed. After a couple of minutes, it left, quickly making its way back to the door, slipping out of my room, closing the door as it left. It paid no attention to me during the entirety of the encounter, and when it was out of the room, I heard a couple chirps, quickly followed by silence. At this point, I was finally able to bury myself under the blankets, where I eventually passed out. My sister and I never got hurt, and I don't think they ever did much more than observe. I'm certain that my sister didn't even know because she was such a heavy sleeper. In hindsight, I think it was mostly interested in my sister, and I don't feel its presence in my room very often since we stopped sharing rooms. I'm not really sure what it was. I don't feel like it 100% fits the common gray description, but I feel like it's similar enough. This experience I had still affects me today, and while I don't suffer from any crippling fear or PTSD, I still occasionally get really scared. I still sleep completely under the covers, and I always make sure I have a flashlight with me under the covers, just in case of an emergency. I really don't think there was any malicious intent with this thing at all, but I'm scared anyways. I wish I could just brush it off as an overactive imagination or as sleep paralysis, but I don't think that's what it was. I still occasionally hear the chirping and feel the tapping. I wonder why it visits sometimes. I think it just likes to check up on the kid who it saw every once in a while. Maybe one day I will muster up the courage to try and confront it if it's ever around. Little background on where I am before I jump into the encounter. I'm stationed in Arizona. I live on base in the dorms, and in these dorms, the rooms are a bit small. I live in 10 by 10 with a door leading into the shared kitchen bathroom with my roommate. This adjoining door is very heavy and makes an audible sort of shh when closed. On the door is a deadbolt on my side of the door, to keep my roommate out, obviously. When the deadbolt is turned either way, the metal clicks into and out of place very loudly. And in a 10 by 10 room, this sound is obnoxiously loud. At the time of this occurrence, my roommate had been gone for 2 weeks for training. Nobody was in the room with me in my dorm. Another side note, everybody keeps their adjoining door locked 24/7 because who wants someone busting in on their room? I'm definitely one of those that keeps the deadbolt in place, unless I'm actively in the kitchen or using the bathroom. The deadbolt only locks from my side of the door. Keep this in mind. I fell asleep around 8 a.m. Saturday from staying awake all night, and I had a dream. It was a movie night in my dad's room for our family. So, both my brothers had their little inflatable mattress on the floor on the far side of my dad's bedroom on the side of his bed furthest from the door. Nothing really weird about the movie. We watched it, and then it was time for bed. My brothers were passed out on the mattress asleep, and my stepmom was asleep holding my dad. I was leaning up against my dad's bed, back facing the doorway, with one leg on the ground, and one leg leaned on the mattress, kind of folded in at my stomach for some reason. My dad and I are just talking about something random, keeping our tones hushed so we don't wake the rest of the family. When we both completely freeze mid-sentence, we heard someone wheezing. Don't ask me why, but for some reason, we both knew it wasn't either one of my brothers. It was coming from beneath the bed. We were frozen, eyes locked on each other, listening to this rasping for what felt like minutes. Finally, I was able to move and realized too late that my leg was asleep. I fell down off the bed because of this, and I landed on the ground with a thud, smacking my head on the hardwood. The wheezing continued, louder now. I can't really explain what the wheezing sounded like. It was definitely lacking a rhythm, and sounded literally like someone was forcing their breathing. I opened my eyes and realized I was searching the darkness under the bed, crazily, for some shadow or movement. As soon as my eyes locked onto a body, I started screaming, "Go away, go away, go away," maybe 10 to 20 times. I realized I couldn't move again. My eyes were locked only on a shadowy figure, unmoving. After I finished repeating my screams at the shadow, I felt a sudden release. The wheezing had stopped, and I could finally move again. But I felt super heavy, like my body was absolutely exhausted. I stood up as fast as I could and launched myself onto the bed with my father. My dad's eyes were very big, and the white stood out to me in the darkness of the room. For some reason, it made my fear rise further into my throat. We lay there, clutching each other, literally frozen with fear. Like that fear you get that makes you breathe immensely quiet. I strained against the darkness in search of something. Primal fear. If I move, I die. We sat like that for minutes, but it felt like hours. We were starting to feel a bit relaxed as we hadn't heard the rasping breath for a while, when something very tall and very emaciated stood from the other side of the bed I'd fallen at. It was so dark in the room, I could only make out a shadow, so I couldn't see any coloration or definite details. Just a very shadowy tall figure. I could only make out the face, really. I would draw it so maybe you guys can see what it looks like. My dad and I didn't breathe at all. We waited for it to move, but it just stood there, 2 feet away. I assumed it was watching us. The wheezing had begun again. After what felt like literally hours of watching this creature, just listening to the strained wheezing and staring at it, it started to loom over the bed. A long hand outreached towards me. The thing had spindly like fingers. No claws, but like weird pointy fingertips. Very skinny wrist and joints on the hand. I woke up as the creature touched me. My body is extremely heavy now. I feel absolutely drained, and my eyelids are heavy from exhaustion. I pick up my phone to look around in the darkness of my room, and see that somehow I've managed to sleep until Sunday at 3:33 a.m. I know what this means, as I've grown up watching all the typical scary horror movies, reading the scary stories, etc. I start to feel that thick fear rise in my throat again. My eyes welt with tears, and I'm ready to turn my phone flashlight on to scan the room thoroughly, when I hear my connecting door to the kitchen slide closed and lock. I feel myself stiffen from fear, and I widen my eyes in the darkness, trying to see what could have closed my door. Now, these doors are very heavy, like I said before, and have a distinct sound when closed. Deadbolt is heavy metal and makes a loud noise when moved, kind of like a metal pang. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, and had to literally hold my eyelids open because I was feeling so weighed down. After turning on my phone flashlight and seeing nothing, I got up and turned all the lights on. I'm too scared to go back to sleep now. The shadows being cast in my room seem to move when I look away from them, so I've turned on all the lights. It's now Tuesday, and I have not slept since. My skin is crawling from the feeling of being stared at, as if any form of lights are turned off. I will be doomed. I woke in a sweat puddle, feeling as though I had been through hell, and I just literally have tears streaming down my face typing this. But I need to get this down, so maybe I can get some answers. I have attached what is a drawing of what I've seen. I have an experience I have told many people about, and no one believes me except my family. This makes me think that they have had similar experiences themselves. They believe talking about these things welcomes them. My family had a ranch growing up in northern Cali. It's been in our family since the early 1900s. It's surrounded by forest, about 100 feet away from the house. Cowboys would pay to take a bath on their travel and sleep in the stable. There is still a sign up there for the baths. We converted that stable into a home after the original house my grandfather built burnt down in the 50s. Very isolated. My whole life we would spend weekends up there. No phone, no cable, just electricity. If you got hurt or cut your hand in the wood splitter, tough luck. It's an hour to town. It was very basic necessities. Wood-burning stove, old appliances with everything. Despite growing up there, we always carried guns, even to the bathroom that was connected to the house, but you had to go out the front door to get to it. It wasn't an outhouse, but kind of. As kids, we always had to be in groups of 3 or 1 kid and 1 adult. I had little things happen that terrified me, but always told not to acknowledge it. When I was 21, my grandfather was having a hard time staying there all weekend, and I loved it up there so much, I moved in with my dog. He was a big, staffy pit bull, and went everywhere with me in my tiny red 1993 Miata. I loved that car. This was around 2009. My cell phone worked up there, but I had to set it on this specific shelf, and it was pretty inconsistent at times with text, but I could always call out standing on a chair by the shelf. I had a boyfriend who was an asshole. He came up every day, but he never slept over. It was scary up there. I would watch movies and listen to the radio. Not having cable even added to the isolation. So, one day, it's super windy, but the power, by some miracle, was staying on. There was one light above the barn that barely reached my house. It had 2 front doors, one in the kitchen and one in my room on the same side of the house, about 15 to 20 feet apart. My dog starts going crazy. I assume it's either the wind or a mountain lion. I wasn't about to let him out. The screen is kind of rattling with everything else, and then I hear it right outside of my door. I swear on my son, I heard a tiny voice say, "Hello," with another pause. "Hello." Pause. "Hello." It sounded like a very small person, but not a child. No knocking, no response to anything I said, just the same word over and over, but like they were trying to get it right. The L's sounded like R's. I was so petrified, and my dog is freaking out with his hair up. I'm calling my boyfriend, crying, and he is on the way, but it's like an hour to get here, and everyone loses service on the way up. I called my grandfather, and he was so mad, saying grab the gun, and do not open the door by any means. I was crying and begging for it to answer. I asked if it needed help. Does it want my phone? I was so scared that it would only say hello. Everything felt so wrong. I did not try and peek out the window. It was older glass, the kind that looks uneven, if that makes sense. It's very easily broken. My boyfriend arrived first, then my uncle. Before they got there, it became less and less, and then nothing. There's no way a person was wandering out there. The way to my stoop was all mud. The stable is kind of on a small cliff, so walking to the stoop where the stairs are is uphill from the house. No footprints, animal or human, are in the mud. Nothing touched or taken, not even from the fridge that was outside near the bathroom area. I moved back to town not long after that. I never slept there again. The way my uncle acted when he got there was like he knew there was nothing to be found, and he didn't ask me many questions at all. He told me to keep my dog on a leash, and that was it. No one talked about it the next day, except me. I know there are amazing